design plans and our stop locations are in sync with their ongoing projects as well. And this is our southern terminus location. And I'll go ahead and let Ashley, you can want to elaborate a little bit more on this one.
Absolutely. Yeah, this was one, as Greg mentioned previously, we heard a lot of great feedback from the community during our public meetings back in the fall. And one of the concerns was mentioning about the southern terminus and making sure we provide safe accessibility for folks in this area of the corridor. So certainly we acknowledge that the pedestrian crossings here are something that we need to be very mindful of, and we want to make sure that they are safe and accessible. So Cole, if you could advance to the next bullet. One of the things that is also happening in this area of the corridor is some great improvements to the Atlanta Beltline to the South Side Trail. So folks may have seen some of the recent media coverage that the South Side Trail did get a RAISE grant, which is really, really awesome for our community that we can now advance this project. And we will be having a couple planned access points to the Beltline that you can see here. And I think, Cole, if you could go one more slide, we'll pull that up. Additionally, the Skyline Apartments is also a really exciting development in this area of the corridor to be able to provide wonderful residential uses. And they are also planning to make a connection down to the Beltline Trail as part of their development. And really excited to see the partnership there between the Skyline Apartments and the Atlanta Beltline, and just great partnerships in this area of the corridor. And then the last thing I also wanted to mention is obviously, this is complex, right? We've got a lot of things going on here. We have with the trail, we have the MARTA service, we have some redevelopment happening, and we also have the railroad. So there's a lot of different entities that are involved in finding a really viable solution to safe pedestrian access in this area. And Greg has started to meet with other agencies, and that includes the city, Norfolk Southern, the Georgia Department of Transportation, that's actually in the process of upgrading this traffic signal in the location and providing some additional pedestrian accessibility, as well as those private property owners and the Atlanta Beltline. And the last thing I wanted to mention also is the MARTA Route 55 service. So there is great service that MARTA is providing right now in this area that does also provide accessibility in the area and across the railroad track. So again, MARTA is working in partnership with all of these additional entities to make sure that we come to a good solution for the community that does provide safe and accessible connections in this area.
We also had some pedestrian connections at the 3 heavy rail station locations. And so just taking a look at those, we wanted to make sure that it was a good experience for the pedestrians after they get off the bus and making their way to the station. And so the one we talked about a little bit earlier, where we showed you the MLK station, and then this Georgia State station just being right around the corner. And so what we did is we went out there and we took a look at what are the current conditions and what's going to be needed in order to bring the sidewalks up to a reasonable state, and also taking a look at any curb ramps. We looked at lighting conditions, make sure that those are well kept as well. And some of the wayfinding too. You may have visitors or folks that get off and not know exactly where the heavy rail station is. So what we notice is that the wayfinding signs are actually right at the station. So we would have some from the BRT just kind of letting them know to go around the corner or whichever direction they need to go to. But what we're showing in these photos is basically just some of the conditions out there, maybe needing, one of them needs some hexagonal pavers replaced, or any trees that are upheaving some of the pavement or the sidewalk that may need to be, have those trip hazards removed, putting in any curbing that's needed, as well as lighting. And so this shows the 5 Point station, where you've got actually 2 opportunities to go to the station from the BRT stop. You can actually go along Broad Street, or you can go along Forsyth. And so we looked at both the top and the bottom location. And of course, Garnett, where you get off at Mitchell Broad, and you'll just go across to Trinity, and then you'll go right along into the station. And so we just looked at the situations out there. We've been working with our agency partners, City of Atlanta, and also from there, we'll be talking to some developers in the area. I know Newport's doing work in that area as well, that are looking like they are ready to assist and help out, making sure that the project's a success. And then the dedicated lanes, that was something else that we heard. For the most part, 85% dedicated lanes. This is a really good BRT project, because when you look at it nationally, they consider anything over 50% dedicated lanes to be a permanent guideway. And so with us coming in at 85, that came in relatively high, but there was still, we wanted to look at, was there any opportunity for us to get even more? And so we took a look at some of the shared sections that you can see on the map on your left side, the parts that are in yellow. And there was 3 areas that we looked at for the possibility. One of them up near the top, it was MLK from Forsyth to Ted Turner. On that particular side, the bus is on the extreme right side of the roadway where it stops, and it actually stops on the near side before the signal. And then to go through the signal, and it would have to work its way over to the left most lane in order, when it gets up that 1 block to Ted Turner, to make that left turn. And so because there's only 2 lanes going up that direction, at this point, it wasn't really a good option for us to go with that way, because the bus has the TSP, it typically can get out before traffic, or it'll get out right after the traffic. So it wouldn't have much competition at this point. So we just said it was an opportunity to look at that location. But at this point, we weren't going to make the change. Then there's another location at Washington Street, right near the City Hall location. And out there from Mitchell Street all the way over to Trinity, there's going to be city's planning to put a cycle track out there. And so that's going to absorb 1 lane. And then if we went ahead and put a dedicated lane, that would take 2. And with the capacity out there, that would put a strain definitely on the capacity. So we didn't want to interfere with that section. But where the cycle track stops at Trinity, from Trinity over to Memorial, there was an opportunity there. And just looking at that opportunity, by the time the bus gets in that dedicated lane and then makes a turn, it would have to actually have its own cycle. And then having its own cycle, again, would be a capacity issue, especially during rush hour. So we talked with the city and with GDOT at that location as well. And what we came up with is that we'll just go ahead and leave it the way it is until revenue service. And then if it becomes an issue, we'll revisit that, take a look at it. And the last section, the one that's in somewhat of a loop over by the Capitol Square, that location, the actually Georgia Building Authorities, we've talked with them, and it would, they have a few more folks that they have to talk with in order to get an approval on that one. However, when we looked at that one and we took a look at the capacity, it really wouldn't make a difference for us meeting our headways, whether we get a dedicated lane there or not. But it would be good to just have more dedicated lane to our route. But it wouldn't really make a difference to us with regards to getting headways or not. So at this point, we don't have it, but it may become a dedicated lane or may not. And we're just waiting to see as we're continuing discussions. And so the bus enforcement was something else that we heard. And so at this point, what we're planning to do is some major education and marketing campaign to make sure that everybody understands how to operate, especially around a bus only lane. This is, again, our first ever bus rapid transit in the area. And so there's going to be a lot of education out there that we'll have to do. But along with that, we also have the backing of the Atlanta APD, who will be there as well, helping with enforcement. We're also looking into other areas, camera enforcement, which is something that we're pursuing. Of course, with that, it would be more than just us pursuing it. It has to pass the Georgia Assembly. And so there's a little bit more that we're actually doing that in order to get that enforcement out there. But there's one thing about having these lanes as well. There's no barriers. And so we didn't actually have the width on the roadway to put barriers to have the lane barriered off. But if there is some sort of an issue for some reason in the lane, the bus does have the ability to go around it and then get back in the lane and keep going. And so that's actually another plus for these BRT lanes. And I'll hand it to Ashley with the bikes.
Awesome. Thank you, Greg. So, another one of the great comments that we heard from the community was a desire to make sure that bikes were able to be safely accommodated along the corridor. And Marta has worked really hard with the team at the City of Atlanta to figure out ways to do that. So, I just want to talk through a few things. Obviously, the city is going to be moving forward with the Washington Street Cycle Track project, which is a really exciting project to be able to provide great north south connectivity along a great route there. So what we've done as part of the BRT project is to make sure we provide connectivity into that Washington Street cycle track. So that's going to look a variety of different ways depending on what corridor you're on. Along Trinity, we have a short section on Trinity that will be sharrows and just shared spaces there. As we move on to Memorial and start to go down Capitol, we'll have a combination of bike lanes that are either going to be on the sidewalk or on the road, depending on the space that is available. But the bikes will have dedicated space that won't be shared with pedestrians. It won't be shared with the bus, won't be shared with cars. It'll all be dedicated space as we continue south down towards Hank Aaron. And we do want to mention too, Cole, if you could just hit the next slide there. We do want to make sure that we're also providing future connectivity as we get further along the corridor. I know you kind of saw in the cross section earlier in that area where we're doing the redevelopment in the Publix grocery store. We are going to have bike lanes in that area. And then we want to make sure we connect to future bike facilities along Georgia Avenue, which will just give us great access to eventually get down to the wonderful redevelopment and improvements of the Atlanta Beltline and the South Side Trail. So what we envision is using some of our great neighborhood streets to provide those lower stress and safe bike accommodations to get people down south to DH Stanton Park and eventually to the Beltline. So we really appreciate the comments that came through from the community. Marta is very focused on making sure and understanding that folks that are using the BRT may also be, taking their bike on the bus, and we want to make sure when they're getting on and off that they have safe places to access and go. So thank you so much, Cole, for sharing these great slides.
All right, so we want to talk to you a little bit about the project timeline. As you can see, there's been significant amount of work completed as the project is nearing this 90% final design milestone. And you can see the boxed area. That's where we are at this point. We're scheduled to complete the design by the summer of this year. And then we'll advertise the project for construction bid. And then we're anticipating starting construction in the late spring of 2023. And then we're anticipating construction to last roughly about 2 years. So it'll be finished in spring of 2025 and then complete the system and vehicle testing and any training that's needed. And then we'll begin revenue service in the summer of 2025. So it's pretty exciting times. Project has definitely moved along. So with that, we'll stop here and give everybody an opportunity for any questions or further discussion on the project.
Great. Thanks, Greg. So my name is Eric Bosman. I'm also with Kinley Horn, and my role this evening is to help moderate our question and answer period. A number of you have done so. The Q&A has been pretty lively throughout the presentation. If you have questions that have come up or comments that you want to make, feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen to submit those. And we're gonna begin rolling through a number of the comments and the questions that we've received so far. So the first is sort of a question about the timing of the route, the headways. So let's start by reiterating what is the timing, how frequent is the service, and how is that different during the daytime versus evening and weekends? Greg, we did such a good job of getting you on mute.
Yeah. Okay, can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
So the actual entire route is the bus it takes to do the entire route is approximately 15 minutes. However, we have 4 buses that are going to be running on the route on a regular basis, and so we're looking at 10-minute headways. Basically, that means you'll just be waiting roughly 10 minutes. So if you go to stop, you miss the bus, within another 10 minutes, you've got another one coming. So you're not sitting there having a pretty heavy wait. And especially during peak periods, that's where having these dedicated lanes and the buses having that TSP, which is ability to change the signals, that's where this is going to really come in heavy. because they'll have their own lane to make sure that they can maintain those headways 10 minutes. And we're really trying to target less than 10, but we've been advertising 10. In the evenings, it looks like our service currently, we may be pushing it a little bit to maybe 15-minute headways, somewhere between 10 to 15. And that's where we are at this time.
Great. Thanks. Let's segue a little bit. There were a couple of questions about sidewalks and connectivity to the rail stations. I think this first question came in pretty early, and then later in the presentation, you talked about connectivity to the rail stations. But just to reiterate, how far is the route from the 5 Points MARTA station?
The route is approximately a block away. We're on MLK, right at the between Broad Street and Forsyth, and so you can either go across Forsyth or go across Broad, that one block, and when you get right by Alabama, then you enter the station.
Great. And then Ashley, there was a question. I know some of our graphics are simulations, and it may be that in one of the graphics, it looks like the station is sitting on the current sidewalk. What's the sidewalk plan, and how do folks get around the stations?
Yeah, that's a wonderful question. So thanks for asking that. So many of our stations are what we consider to be a walk behind station. And what that would mean is that if you're using the BRT service, if you're a customer, you would walk up and wait on the platform. But if you're just walking around the neighborhood or have a different destination in mind that's not the BRT, you would walk behind the BRT station. Now, not all of the areas of the corridor necessarily had space for us to accommodate that. So in some cases, we have a wider station platform that's intended to be what we call a walk-through station. So not only would the folks that are using the BRT service use that platform, other pedestrians are just walking in the area and accessing different destinations would also walk through the station platform. So that's why we call it walk through. And anywhere that we had to do that, we made sure that it was a wider area, 10 feet wide, as opposed to your standard sidewalk width. So we had plenty of capacity to handle both the customers and other pedestrians.
Great. And as long as we're talking about stations and imagery, there was a comment that it looked like the eastbound station at Mitchell might not be level. Is that a graphic piece, or do we have stations that are not level?
That's a really great observation. So we do have to deal with the conditions of the built environment, right? And as folks know, we start to get into some steep grades in various different parts of downtown. So it's a wonderful observation. The station does actually match the slope of the road. So if you're driving kind of and you feel like you're going downhill in your car, the bus is going to feel the same way. And the reason that we match the station to that grade of the road is so that folks can board from all three doors of the buses safely. Like Greg mentioned previously, you won't have to step up or step down. So to keep that slope kind of matching the slope of the road, that ensures you don't have any step getting on or off of the bus.
Great, thanks. So let's talk a little bit about traffic signal prioritization. There was a question about how, in terms of how that works, how close does the bus have to be to the signal for the traffic signal prioritization to kick in? And the genesis of the comment was, if there's traffic that's backed up a bit and the bus is a few car lengths back, can it use the traffic signal prioritization to sort of move everybody out of the way and make sure that it stays on time?
Greg, you want me to take a stab at this one?
Sure.
So if Greg knows I'm a technology nerd. So if I get too geeky in this, Greg will have to help me out here.
I'll reel you in.
So the bus actually communicates with the traffic signal via cellular technology. So really similar to how you would use your cell phone. That's how the bus and the traffic signal talk to one another. So that means there is no distance limitation. And actually the bus is continually using GPS satellites in a real time. We know exactly where that bus is. We're pulling the bus really frequently to know its location. So there isn't going to be any type of a distance limitation on the TSP. And one of the other really neat things about the Georgia DOT's traffic signal system is actually the traffic signals also talk to one another. So in the case that was mentioned about, there being a line of cars and the bus potentially getting stuck behind those line of cars, what the traffic signal system can actually do is the signals can talk to one another, and one signal can tell several other signals downstream that the bus is arriving in the near future so that those signals can react accordingly also.
Great, thanks, Ashley. So a couple of questions about the fare collection system. We mentioned that it's off-board fare collection. So talk a little bit about how does that work? Do the riders validate their card before they enter? If that's the case, how do we enforce that? And is it only off-board fare collection, or once you get on the vehicle, can you pay on the vehicle as well?
Well, the vehicles are actually going to be equipped with onboard fare collection, but for the BRTs, what we're having is, and that's the beauty of having this BRT and trying to make these headways and everything else, is that you will just pay in the offboard, and then we also have validating machines there to validate your tickets. So with that being said, you can go in the front door, you can go in the middle door, you can go in the back door. And so that helps onboard and offboard folks rapidly so that they can continue on. With regards to having your tickets checked from time to time, there will be, at this point, from time to time, what we have is somebody will come by and just maybe randomly take a check and make sure that you have your fare has been paid for. So at this point, that's how it's going to be handled.
Great. And my understanding, Greg, is that's fairly consistent with new transit systems. And also that's the enforcement method on the streetcar now, correct?
Correct. Yes.
Great. Couple of questions about dedicated lanes and the route. So we've had some back and forth about red paint in the transit lanes. What's the current status of painting the lanes, Greg?
Well, the current status is that we are going with the red paint. That would really alert people to, hey, there's something different about this lane, and so they would know that, yeah, that's a dedicated lane. And plus, along with the education and everything else, they'll know how to operate with that lane. It also would stand out for the buses, so the buses would know, okay, that's the lane that they're supposed to operate in as well. So that's leaving the other lanes for the traffic. There'll be other pavement markings there as well, just for guidance. But yes, we're going with the red lane at this current time.
Great. And I think, Greg, we can probably give a shout out to City of Atlanta DOT. I mean, that's been a solution that's been a little bit up in the air, but I think the city it also feels strongly about having that from an enforcement and a visibility standpoint. So
yeah, the city was definitely very instrumental in that. And so yeah, big shout out to them as well.
Yeah,
Right.
Breaking news decision really just, Greg, came through this week. So this is hot off the presses.
Great. So let's talk about, we mentioned 85% dedicated lanes. So that means 15% not dedicated. And Ashley, you talked a little bit about with the traffic signal prioritization, how that prevents the vehicle from getting stuck in regular traffic. But talk a little bit about that 15% shared right away. How do we avoid congestion, and what are some of the key reasons that we have that 15%?
Yeah, and this was, as Greg noted, there was a lot of analysis done over the last 6 months to determine if any additional dedicated lanes along some of this 15% segment were viable. And I think the one area that we maybe have some continued concerns with is along Washington Street. And I think anyone that has driven Washington Street in the evening knows it's really busy, right? And I think as we looked at the analysis for Washington Street, in order to have the bus to have its own lane and to be able to turn safely onto Memorial, it would have to have, its own signal phase, its own bus phase to do that. And as we looked at the analysis, taking that time away from other vehicles actually created a lot more congestion on that section of Washington that would impact not only the bus, but other vehicles as well. But I think we have great commitment and partnership from the city that if that area of the corridor were to be a challenge as the Summerhill goes into operation, that the city is willing to work with us to look at, as Eric mentioned, some advanced signal technologies and additional options there. I think the rest of the quarter, we're feeling really good about and not too terribly concerned about any additional delays to the BRT. We'll just kind of continue to keep an eye on that operation along Washington Street.
Great. The red paint conversation was a good one. We have lots of thumbs up in the chat for the red paint. So big support there.
Awesome.
Ashley, you also talked a little bit about lane enforcement. I mean, Greg, how do we enforce people not driving in the red striped transit lanes? What is that going to look like?
Well, what it's going to look like is it's going to be really, again, like I was saying, education, but there's going to be some Atlanta police that are going to have to really assist us with the enforcement at this point. We're also looking at other opportunities, possibly having MARTA police, if they would be able to get the authorization to assist. We're looking at those avenues, as well as I was saying with the camera enforcement too. So those would be all the opportunities. But what would happen is, because they're bus only lanes, the vehicles would be staying out of those lanes, but there is going to be some education, because at a certain point when you get close to an intersection, if a car had to make a right turn, let's just say, we're not going to be having the cars turn from their lane, crossing the bus lane and going across. There may be an opportunity for them to get in at a certain distance from the curb corner in order to make this safe right-hand turn.
Great. And I think you mentioned Tuesday night in our in-person meeting, Greg, that there's been some discussion of automated camera-based enforcement, that there's some state legislation involved in that. So that's not known at this time, I assume.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah, it's a little bit more of an effort there. We are actually currently pursuing it though, but it will have to be presented to the Georgia Assembly at the state level and get that approval first. And then from there, it could come down and we could utilize it at the city level.
Great. Okay. One of our attendees noted that, as you come east on Mitchell Street, then instead of continuing straight onto Capitol Square and then onto Capitol to make that right turn, we've got this hitch where you've got to turn and go down to Memorial and back around. Can y'all explain why we can't continue straight through on Mitchell past the Capitol? Ashley, you might.
Yeah, the state is no longer allowing either vehicular traffic or transit traffic to travel that eastern section of Mitchell, so east of Washington Street. So unfortunately, that's really not within MARTA's control to do. We understand that was done for some safety reasons around the legislature. So yep, that is the reason for the route running the way that it does.
Great, thanks. So coming down the home stretch here, it's electric. So confirm that the vehicles are electric, and what does that mean in terms of charging?
Well, what it means, first of all, we're using 60-foot articulated buses, and yes, they are electric. So that's zero emissions. So that's a good thing there. With regards to charging, we're actually doing electric vehicle charging modeling as we speak. We're getting ready to get the results in within about a week or so, and that's going to let us know how long these buses are going to maintain a charge. And what that's going to let us know is if we have to have en route charging at the southern terminuses where we've depicted our spot, or if they'll be able to just charge at the maintenance facility and then come out and run the route and then go back to the maintenance facility. So we will know that information within the next couple of weeks, but yeah, that's what we're doing currently.
Great. So just so everyone's aware, we're getting towards the end of the question list. From an access standpoint, I don't see anyone that is on their mobile phone. If you are on your mobile phone, feel free to raise your hand and we will get you recognized, since you can't use the chat feature from your mobile phone. One other question about the Route 55. So you all mentioned that the Route 55 is going to continue. Has there been a look at whether the Route 55 might change and only run to the southern terminus and then run south, or is it going to continue to run north?
Well, at this point, we're not going to make any changes to the routes. We want to just kind of go ahead and evaluate ridership and see how that goes. And then, of course, one of the things that we notice is that the buses that run on the Route 55, and of course our BRT buses, well, our platforms are 14 inches high. So we had to test to see if our buses could actually stop and pick up people there as well. And so they actually can. So the advantage on this particular route is if somebody wants to go further south past the train tracks and continue on, then they can catch the Route 55 from some of the BRT stops along Hank Aaron and switch over, either go to the 55 or switch to the BRT, either way, with their transfer from bus to bus, and then just continue on. So at this point, there's no change.
Okay, great. There have been a couple of comments about bus and bicycle integration. I think we talked a little bit, Ashley, you covered in the presentation about the bicycle piece. There are some comments about Washington Street is plenty wide. We can afford to do some other things with that right of way, including the bus lane. There's a reference to some other conversations that we've had. Maybe we want to mention, you know, the number of stops that we have on the route. How were those stops set, and are they set at this point?
I'll take a stab at it, Ashley, and then you can follow up on it. But what we did is we planned out the stops, and the stops that are set up along the corridor, they're spread out about a third of a mile apart. And what that does is it gives an opportunity to really service there's employment centers through there. There's other developments, and it was spread out really to accommodate and service properly those businesses. If we spread them out too far, then it wouldn't really have made much sense, especially in that densely business area. They're not stopping as frequently as regular buses, but they are getting you to event centers, getting you to the rail stations, which was really important, especially 5 Points, so they can get that east-west and north-south connection, and also really just tying in that whole thing, getting you down to the belt line at the bottom, and then coming back up towards the top area in that whole Mitchell Street, Newport, where they have some developments there and eateries and everything else. So it just really tied out and worked out really well.
Great, thanks. So I think, not that we addressed every question, but I think we have addressed the category of every question. There were quite a few questions on electric vehicle charging. We sort of lumped those together, the sidewalk questions as well. So if there's any last questions, please feel free to put those in the Q&A. Greg, Ashley, anything else that we haven't hit tonight that you wanted to make sure that we inform the public on? Also, just looking through this list one last time. All right, I think we've covered it. So as Cole said at the beginning of the meeting, we have been recording this meeting. We did actually at one point begin broadcasting on YouTube Live, but we will have the entire recording posted. So if any of you on YouTube Live missed the very beginning of the meeting, we will get that recording up so that everyone can follow from start to finish. Just as a point of information, tonight is the second meeting in the series. We did have a in-person meeting Tuesday night at Fanplex. There were boards posted as well. So a lot of this information you'll be able to find on the MARTA website as well. With that, let me recognize Greg Jafrida, who's our Direction of Outreach and Communications. And Greg, if you wanna wrap us up.
Oh, sure, thank you. I also just wanted to kind of add to Greg Holder's comments regarding bus service. One important thing that MARTA is working on throughout our system is the bus network redesign. And so we have been, you've probably seen a lot of social media posts and emails about the survey that we're collecting for that, but we are looking at our whole bus network top to bottom. And that's something where in the future, I think we'll be taking a look at a lot of these local bus routes that are running parallel with our BRT and ART routes once they've been delivered, and really thinking about whether we duplicate those same routes. But there will be no changes until these projects are delivered and up and running, and we can really observe what kind of travel behavior we're seeing. So.
Great, thanks, Greg. So we did stall just long enough that we got a few more questions about the stops.
Whoops. Okay.
So let me get these out there. Schedules posted at stations. Will the schedules be posted at the stations? What other information can folks expect to find there?
Yeah, that's a great question. So the schedules and the routes are going to be posted at the station. And as Greg had showed you in one of the early slides, there will also be a passenger information display sign, really similar to what you see in the MARTA rail stations, that will tell you what time the next bus is coming. It will also tell you when the next train is coming if your intention is to get off of the BRT and connect, as Greg mentioned, to Five Points or Garnett or GSU. So yeah, there's going to be great information in place in the stations that I think will really help folks in getting around the area and really help with that time connection point.
Great. And then there was a question about the branding. When will the branding be complete, and when will we know what the vehicles are going to look like?
Greg Holder,
Gosh,
I'll be happy to jump in on that. Do you have, sorry.
Sure, go right ahead.
Okay. We are working on that right now. We are working through a few different scenarios for both our BRT and ART lines that are in planning right now. ART refers to arterial rapid transit. That's kind of enhanced local bus service. That's not quite on the same level as everything that we're talking about here tonight for Summerhill. But we are going through a few scenarios, and then we're going to be workshopping those internally at MARTA with some of our advisory councils and our board. And we're talking about some sort of public engagement campaign for that. So stay tuned. I think we should have some more clarity on that maybe later this calendar year, and hopefully something that we can show as we get into construction on this project. Does that sound about right, Greg and Ashley? Is that?
Yep, sounded good.
I was just going to say, I'm always super excited to see the brand. That's really, really awesome when you get to see what the bus is going to look like, and it makes it really real. So we're super excited to see that process advance.
And Greg, there's a follow-up question on this one, and I have to read it word for word. The question is, will you make a sweet announcement video for that?
We'll have to talk to our master of videos, Adam Shoemaker, our director of digital media, who is the creator behind our very popular MARTA Heroes videos, and I'm sure we'll come up with something special. So, thanks.
Awesome.
Can't wait.
He did a real good job of that MARTA Heroes.
Great. Well, I'm going to ask Cole to put back up the schedule slide, just so once again you all can see the schedule. As Greg mentioned, final design of the system is expected this summer. We begin looking for a contractor this winter so that construction can begin in spring of 2023, with the service anticipated to begin in summer of 2025. So we appreciate everyone's involvement and engagement in this effort. I can hardly explain what a beneficial process it has been since our October meetings of getting everyone's input, thinking through the details of the system, staying in line with our grant and with the direction of our board, but also creating the absolute best BRT system that we can for downtown Atlanta. So we appreciate everyone's input and your involvement. We look forward to continuing to hear your comments and your input, and look forward to having this service operational in 2025. So thank you so much for your time tonight. We look forward to seeing you in the future.
Definitely. Thank y'all.